Hi everyone, welcome to Immigration Lawyers Podcast episode 45 covering June 12th to June 18th, 2017. A quick apology for what happened with the last podcast. When I uploaded, there were some issues that cut off the end of the podcast, so I had to re-upload it. But it's up and it did well. A lot of you downloaded and listened to it. Thank you so much. So without further ado, let's get it started. Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I am the host, Attorney John Khosravi, and I practice U.S. immigration law exclusively. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney for specific legal guidance that suits your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. For more information about me, please visit www.jqqlaw.com. So as usual, I'm going to get started with things that were in the news that were interesting. First thing is California's new budget that was passed included information in there that asked for an audit of immigration facilities that were located in California to see what kind of issues they have and how ICE is dealing with detained immigrants, because there's been news of people dying and getting sick and families having all sorts of problems. Now, ICE didn't like that at all, and they said because of this, they might stop detaining and holding immigrants in California and start moving them to other states. However, I don't know, practically speaking, how feasible that's going to be. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But the second part of this budget bill was interesting because they want to institute a legal fund so that people that are here that are detained, unlawful immigrants, can have access to immigration attorneys. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. At the same time, ICE, mostly in Detroit, Michigan, that area, has started a sweep of around 200 Iraqi immigrants, most of whom had criminal history, many of whom had their convictions and did their time in jail and were out. For example, Christian Iraqis that couldn't go back because of cancellation removal, they were picked up and sent back because apparently when Iraq was taken off the travel ban list of countries, they had negotiated with Iraq so that Iraq would accept those immigrants to be returned back to the home country. This wasn't spoken about or made public, but apparently DHS and State Department or whatever Trump administration individuals worked this out with the Iraqi government to pick up these people and send them back and not have them stay here. So that was an interesting thing that happened. It shows that they're going out of their way to pick up people. It's a little scary for those who are here unlawfully. With regards to Trump, he did some interesting things this week. First of all, he reinstituted a set of restrictions for travel to Cuba by American citizens. So you can't just willy-nilly go and visit there anymore. At least that's the way they want to do it. So-called private tours are going to be banned or restricted. Also, commercial and business relationships with certain companies in Cuba are going to be restricted. So we'll see how that actually plays out. The whole thing didn't stop, but there was some pullback on that policy. Also, DHS said they're no longer going to push DAPA, deferred action for parents of childhood arrivals, I'm not sure it's child arrivals, or DAPA, as you all probably know. Supreme Court had already stopped this, but apparently internally DHS has said they're reversing it. But DACA is not being reversed for now. So deferred action young people in the U.S. are allowed to stay here, have the work permit, and avoid being removed as long as they stay in proper status with no criminal activity. Apparently in the first quarter of this year, 120,000 applications for DACA were approved. So this program is happening and it's going actively. It is a good program. I don't see how anyone can have a problem with this program. And people, trolls have said stuff on my my recordings about this, but I can't imagine being a kid coming here at a very young age through force and spending your whole life here, not being able to speak the home language of your country and then being forced to return there, especially if the home country has very difficult issues. I understand that the parents did something illegal, but should the child pay for the sins of the father or the mother? That's a deep question. Now, USCIS also issued a policy memorandum update. The adjudicator's field manual was updated about a nuanced issue of redeployment of immigration or of investment funds. So when a person does EB-5 investment, they put the funds in a business. That business might have did what it needed to do with that money. Also, the funds are there again. they need to stay at risk. So they delineated how this works when you do redeployment of those funds. For example, you can't go and buy treasuries with it or buy bonds or something. You have to redeploy it and keep it at risk in a certain method. So that's something to look into if you're an EB-5 practitioner. It's not always the case that redeployment is necessary, because a lot of times these companies take many years for them to actually get their act together, get the money back. But if it does happen, it's something that you have to be aware of. A quick note that regarding your naturalization, there is a new app that goes over the civic questions, the 100, citizenship questionnaire program. So if you have clients that are tech savvy, that's something to send them so they could practice the questions so they're prepared for their interview. But I'm guessing if someone knows how to use an app, they probably already know most of the answers to the questions. And finally, with regards to news, Supreme Court had an interesting case. This requires like in-depth analysis because it's a constitutional law issue that touches on immigration and all that, so I'm not going to go into it. But basically, there's inconsistencies in immigration law as to how fathers and mothers are treated, especially if they're unwed at the time of the birth of the child when they're getting citizenship. So a case was heard on this, and the Supreme Court said that this kind of gender discrimination or gender bias has to be removed, which sounded like it was going to help the applicant in that case, but in actuality they made it more restrictive how it would work. I think it's for the N600K. They said whatever the status of a married couple should be, that should be consistent all throughout. But this could touch upon other areas of citizenship, and especially getting citizenship from a parent, proving relationships for I-130, where a father needs to show marriage to the mother and a birth certificate of the child with the father's name on it, whereas a mother only needs to show a birth certificate with the mother's name on it. So it goes long. It's something that has to be analyzed. And it's important because usually immigration cases don't get that kind of constitutional review, but this one had that stuff we learned in law school. So it's something interesting to follow and see what it is. But again, it requires like thorough analysis, which I'm not going to do here. Moving on, some stuff about my cases. One thing to note is, and I always seen ESTA questionnaires, a visa waiver program where a foreign national whose country has a agreement with the U.S. that doesn't require him to get a visa. I had seen the questionnaire, and most of my clients that have it from Europe, and I thought it was I have it on my mind, so I'm always aware of what's on there. But someone called me. They had come from Taiwan, and they had been denied an entry. Now their entry issue was obvious. That person had requested a visa, been denied at the embassy, so instead fill out the ESTA, didn't answer the question yes on ESTA where it says have you ever had a visa denied, and then came in. Well, what's it called, CBP noticed that and sent them back. Two, now they have misrepresentation on the record. It's going to be difficult to undo. You have to get a waiver or figure that part out. But when they sent me the questionnaire that was apparently from Taiwan as the questionnaire, it was different than what I've seen from Europe. I'm not sure why that's the case, but they had more specific questions. Not only have you ever been denied a visa, but have you had a visa canceled, or have you been arrested for a crime of moral turpitude. I hadn't seen these questionnaires on the ESTA for Europe, and I may be wrong. I don't know what they sent me, but it was different from Taiwan. So that's something to be mindful of case history, of watching clients, what they do. They make basic mistakes. ESTA isn't something that you need an immigration lawyer for. It was designed so people could do it on their own. But if this person is not paying attention, excuse me, doesn't speak English well enough to answer that, they make mistakes that's going to be a big problem for their future. When they have misrepresentation on their case status, on their immigrant history, that's an uphill battle to undo. Costly, and it's unsure and unclear whether that's going to create the ability for a person to obtain, an immigrant or non-immigrant status. So, is somebody going to hire you to fill out ESTA? No. But ideally, you'd wish at least clients would contact the immigration attorney and talk about that before filling it out, if there's any piece of doubt. One issue I've been having that popped up last week, and I know it happens to everybody, but it's a delay it takes for USCIS to cash the checks on our applications and issue the receipts. So, for example, I filed 2 marriage cases and naturalization case all at the same time at the post office, separate envelopes. The naturalization case and one of the marriage cases was delivered 2 days later. The check was cashed 4 days after it was delivered, which is surprising to me. I never had them cashed that fast. The third case didn't have his check cashed for another week after that. And so it kind of kept me up. I'm like, did I make a mistake? Did I file the check wrong? Did I do this and that? And it was really stressing me out, and I got to stop doing this. When I first started, I had done a mistake once where a file was sent back, and it was so embarrassing that it repeats in my head every time a situation potentially happens like that. I hate for the clients to see that. But everything worked out. The check was cashed, but both of those cases went to the Chicago lockbox. One officer opened it up, cashed a check within a few days. One other waited more than a week. And it's just the way it is. So that's something to be mindful of. Don't get too afraid. I've had cases take up to 3.5 weeks to be cashed. I had a TPS case that took 7 weeks for them to cash a check. And that was really annoying because the TPS period is ending and I didn't want an issue to pop up. But sometimes they do that and there's nothing you can do other than nothing really. Just what you got to do. Another issue I had, which is to be mindful of, is I had a client that was going to go to the U.S. Embassy in Ankara for their the immigrant visa interview. They missed the first interview. Beforehand, we went on the website, told them that we're going to miss it. They said, okay, we missed it, they rescheduled. The second one comes up, they couldn't make it again. Went on the website, told them we're going to miss it. Nothing happens. Day passes, and I start contacting them and saying, listen, I want to reschedule. How do we do that? They say, go to the website. I go to the website. There's no options on the website to do anything. I call the phone number. The U.S. phone number just is an answering machine that says go to the website. The phone number in Turkey doesn't work. The Skype phone number doesn't work. So I email them, and I email them, and it takes like 5-6 days to get a response. And they say, no, to go to the website. I said, listen, the website doesn't work. They said, no, it works. I took screenshots of the website, sent it. They said, no, go back to the website. When it didn't work. I went back and forth for about 6 weeks, and at the end they said, no, it should work. Go to the website. So I went to the website, and all of a sudden it worked. I think they corrected it internally. So I've seen people on the list that have had this problem too. Sometimes there's just glitches in the system. I can't blame the State Department with the amount of numbers they're dealing with. There's going to be glitches, especially with internet and computer stuff. So if you have an interview miss, at least at the U.S. consulate in our U.S. embassy in Ankara, Turkey, and you see it's not coming up, try to go through the website, but email them at their email address and work with them, take screenshots so they could go internally and fix the system so you get the interview. And they work relatively fast. Once it was fixed, they schedule it like this, and it's coming up. So that's one thing to be mindful of. Another thing is on Form I-131, I had a consultation. A client came by who was really frustrated that they had applied for a reentry permit Form I-131. They're only given 1 year on it. Just a little nuanced rule is if you spent, I think it's more than 4 out of the last 5 years outside the U.S., they're not going to issue you a 2-year reentry permit. They're only going to issue a 1-year reentry permit. And it's 1 year continuously after that. But at that point, if you're out too much, I'd be afraid of abandonment despite the fact of having a reentry permit. So the person in that situation needs to really get their stuff together and come back here. I had a case where a person had to do that and they kept renewing like that, but they worked for the United Nations and they had a special United Nations passport, so it was really obvious they're on official business and diplomatic stuff. So that wouldn't be a problem. But the regular person that just wants the green card to use as essentially a tourist visa, after the first 2 tries, I would say, either move here or don't. Make a decision. Lastly, about these kind of stuff, there was an interesting article that came up, a law professor wrote about creating a new system for immigration attorneys that are going to law school. In that, because there's a huge demand for immigration lawyers and that market is undersaturated or doesn't have enough legal representation, especially for people in removal proceedings, and because the lawyers that are going that area might have huge amount of debts who can't afford to really help people in that field with the kind of fees they're charging, they were saying maybe we should have a 1-year degree for lawyers that are immigration lawyers. And so they could go through the necessary course of immigration, but not do stuff that's unrelated to immigration. And I don't want to say incorrectly, but I think they were saying like contracts and torts and civil procedure and civil hearings. Avoiding that stuff because immigration attorneys don't need that and do other stuff. My initial impression was very negative because if as an immigration attorney that went through full 3-year law school at a credit law school, blah blah blah, like all of a sudden if immigration attorneys are like this black sheep that only did for 1 year where everyone else knows what they're doing, it will look terrible. And I mean, immigration attorneys, we're not at the top of the food chain of corporate lawyers and all those $1 million lawyers and everything, but it would be another kick down as to how it presents itself to the public. But just thinking about the poor people who can't afford lawyers, who don't have lawyers, maybe it is a good thing to have more lawyers helping this group because they're not getting the representation they need. I don't know. I don't practice removal defense, but hey, it might be necessary. Now, the way they worded it in that article, it would include applications to USCIS, so it would actually include business immigration cases. And I'd be hesitant definitely for that to not have a 3-year degree, because when I deal with business cases, I have to know about contracts law, I have to review these contracts, business associations, all sorts of different things that require an additional level of sophistication for business-specific cases. And even I have seen immigration attorneys that went full law school, but they never, especially older attorneys, they never did business association or focus on that. And it creates problems when I see their other cases people bring to me, and they didn't know certain things that would make it better for an EB-5 case or an L1 case or EB-1C that the corporation should have set up in a certain format, or been comfortable with how the format of the LLC is and how the picture looks and all that. It's not too complicated, but definitely I would recommend in that type of case that a person has a 3-year degree. But at the end, who knows? 30-year law school for a lot of people is not too serious. It's the first and second year. A lot of it is like boot camp. So going to law school, you don't learn how to practice as a lawyer. You learn how to think like a lawyer. So that whole first year is kind of appropriate to break you down like boot camp in a military situation and bring you back up. But I've heard, these top schools like Yale or Harvard, one of them, you could go to undergraduate classes during law school and get law student credit. So I'm not sure even how important any of this is. I don't remember which one of those Ivy League schools it was. I think it was maybe Harvard. It's a hard thing. But, if people get good representation, however is possible, that's good. I wish the old system of having a student like an intern, but there's a special term for it. I forgot what it was. But you go and sit next to a lawyer for 3 or 4 years, and once you get that knowledge education from seeing it practice, you give the bar exam. That's a good way to do it. I think the old school method of learning hands-on. I still think you could give the bar exam if you've done that. There's a certain way you could do that, but obviously it's not done anymore. People are going through a huge amount of debt, go to law school, which is an interesting system, but I don't put it down. I think if you're a young person or whatever age kind of person, but you work for a lawyer for many years, eventually that skill should go out. They should be able to give the test because they've learned what they need to learn. Finally, I'm going to talk about one of those fun things that's unrelated to immigration practice, but it was related to that book I've been reading, How to Win Friends and Influence People. But it's bigger than that. There was 2 talking points or 2 chapters in there that I wanted to discuss. The first one I mentioned briefly, and the second one I'll go into more in depth because I see this issue come in a lot of the books I read and a lot of like these seminars I go to and just personal life. The first is remembering people's names. People love their own name because most people are thinking about those all the time, and just the way people are. And if you're like me, which is many people is, it's very easy for me to forget names. As soon as you say it, I forget it. And it's not intentional, like I want to forget somebody. It's even people I care about and want to know. But the name thing, I think I'm so focused on like what they're saying and the environment we're in, but the name just comes and goes. But it comes and goes. But it's very important to do your best. When someone introduces themselves to you, hi, I'm John, and you say to yourself, hi, John, and then you had to go John, 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 and then pick a feature on their face, a feature about their how they look to associate that name, so it stays with you. One thing I've been doing when I go to certain meetings where there's a lot of people, they want to introduce themselves, I memorize everyone's names, and then while the meeting's going on, and especially if it gets boring a little bit, I'll go around and just repeat everyone's name and guess, like, this guy's name is this, that lady's name is this. It helps the brain because you're memorizing stuff, so you're kind of exercising the brain. At the same time, you remember those people's names, so when you get up and say, hey, Bob, thank you for sharing that, Jane, thank you for sharing that, they're like, wow, this guy remembered who I was, even though I didn't even meet him. I just got up in a meeting and said my name, and he remembered it from there. It's a super personal and powerful maneuver to do, so I recommend doing your best to remember as many names as possible. The second thing is about, actually there's a quote in the book I want to share with you, and it goes like this. I'll just tell you the story, I guess. Okay, so it says, quote, Benton Love, chairman of Texas Commerce Bank Shares, believes that the bigger a corporation gets, the colder it becomes. Quote, one way to warm it up, he said, is to remember people's names. The executive who tells me he can't remember names is at the same time telling me he can't remember a significant part of his business and is operating on quicksand. So they're talking about if you have a company where the CEO doesn't know everyone's names, they really don't know who the people are running their company, and what kind of company is that where the bosses know how the parts are working out. They have to really know what's going on. Now, when you have 10,000 bill company, that gets hard. But you know the executives, the managers, if you go on the floor, and it talks about those big guys, Carnegie and all those kind of people, they would meet somebody, they would immediately remember their name. Even if they walk through the factory, they'd introduce themselves, get the people's names, reference their names. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, all these presidents, these top presidents remembered all the staff's names. And so it's a very powerful thing. Even George W. Bush, who's, well-known image and popular perception is that he's a bumbling kind of guy, not very bright. He was known for remembering every person's name as soon as he met them, and could go through a whole room and say everyone's names. And that's, his power and family and money, all that got on as president, but you can't count on how powerful that is, that he was so personal to remember everyone's names. It's a powerful thing. The second and even more important thing is the idea of active listening or mindful listening. This is something I've been reading a lot about for years, and it's something I try to practice every day, more in work than in personal life, unfortunately. And in one of the networking groups I have, when we start the session, we spend 3 minutes actively listening to another partner. We group up in 2 people. One person talks for about 2 minutes, the other talks 2 minutes. And we're not allowed to jump in or say anything other than nod and say yes or no. We only have to listen. No taking notes, no asking questions. Really listen to the person. And it's very important in practice, for example, because one, when you really listen to a client, let them talk, they pour their heart out, and you get all the information you need for the case. Sometimes you need to jump in and control it because clients can go all over the place, but it's very important to let them talk and talk and talk, and you get pieces of information. For example, I was doing an I-130 marriage case, and they had a tough time on documenting the relationship. So they kept talking, I kept listening. Eventually it came out they went on this intricate honeymoon and had a bunch of documentation of where they were on the honeymoon. But when I was talking to them about banks and wedding invitations and credit cards and pictures together and emails together and cards together, they didn't have any of that. Just because they weren't that type of family, but they kept talking and they talked about their honeymoon, just friendly. I was listening to that. I'm like, oh, they kept a bunch of documentation of the honeymoon. Now, the second part of that, when you do listen to people, it makes them love you. That's one thing I realized. I had a friend who was a guy who was very did well with the ladies. Girls loved him. And the trick he taught me, and he would talk about why it works, is he's like, whenever he meet a woman or a young lady, he would just sit and let her talk and listen, or call on the phone and spend half an hour, and she would just talk. And he's like, women especially fall in love with you if you just listen to them. That's one of the problems a lot of guys have, is they don't listen to their wives or their girlfriends, and that creates a lot of problem. Because a lot of times women just want to be heard. It's a different dynamic that's going on between guys and gals. Guys could zone out a lot, but it's different how the relationships work with the sexes. And I'm trying to be careful of not being offensive in how I'm saying this, but in general, it's not just when everyone wants to be heard. That's why when you go to parties, people want to talk a lot and talk, and usually they're pretty annoying when they talk too much. But if you're the person listening and you're actively listening, you're not zoning out the whole world, just looking straight in that person's eyes and listening to what they're saying, they're going to bond with you and feel like you're the greatest person in the world. And when you do that with clients, they'll hire you as opposed to someone else, because they'll see you listening. To them, that means you care about them, which is hopefully the case. And when you care about them, the money they saw to be important. They feel like they have a lawyer that cares. And so much complaints that happen from people have of professionals like doctors and lawyers is that they're in it for the money. They're just doing numbers, trying to get them out, get in and get it out. And so when they do finally meet a doctor who, like I've had this problem, most doctors I've got to are just trying to get in and get it out. Okay, you listen to the problem, get in and get out. Have the nurse, physician do it. And it really offends me. I never go back to those doctors that do that. And it should be the same, happens the same for lawyers. When they talk really quick and they say, okay, go to the paralegal, I'm not going to listen to you anymore, I'm off to the next thing. It really offends people. That could lead to bad reviews. The few bad reviews I had on online are because of this issue. Now, all those people I spent 20-30 minutes on the phone listening to, or at least a long time listening to for free, they had issues, and it wasn't my fault for sure. I was handling those cases pretty well, but that happens. People expect you to listen and want you to listen. For immigration, you could kind of pick out the issues and quickly figure out that you can't do it. But I've seen with friends of mine who do civil litigation, personal injury, this kind of stuff, they have to listen to each person that calls, because people kind of want to pour out their heart because they've been damaged, they've been hurt. So you got to listen to that a lot. In those type of practices, probably you need to have an intake person do it, because it could take a long time just to actually get the facts of the matter. But a lot of times immigration, if someone calls me and they say I entered illegally, now I'm married to a U.S. citizen, I immediately know, okay, that's a waiver case, we have to do that. And I don't do waivers most of the time anymore, so I say, okay, I can't help you quickly. So it gets it out quicker. If it's doable, I say, listen, it's a waiver case. I need to have so much facts, we can't really do this on the phone, but come by. And then when they do come to the consultation, spend as much time necessary to get the information out. And so they know you're listening to them, especially in a waiver case. They probably have to go through some terrible stuff. They got to speak about very emotional stuff that's hurtful and they don't want to talk about. So the more you listen and carefully listen and actively listen, the more it's going to help out. That's it for all the stuff I wanted to talk about. This coming week is AILA's National Convention in New Orleans. I'm going to be there. I'm speaking at the law student event. I'm going to have a brunch there. I think that's on Thursday about marketing and immigration law firm, modern immigration law firm. And I'm also at the NBC panel. I think it's on Friday morning. I should have the times and dates if all is clear, but I don't. I'll have it on the plane. I'll figure it all out where I'm supposed to be. But it's going to be a very busy week. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, in and out, just these meetings. I hope to see all of you there if you're coming. Please stop me if you see me. I look forward to speaking with you. It's going to be a very good time. Can't make it this year. Come next year. Go to your regional one. Go to your state-based one. It's a good way to learn and get a lot of information. I went last year to Las Vegas, and with all the money I spent going there and all the time I spent, I got 10 seconds of information about a specific type of waiver, the 237A1H waiver that I wasn't familiar with at the time. That is going to help two of my clients. There's like low bono cases that I just took on because they're good people. I was thinking I have to do this, jump through this hoop, jump through that hoop. But then I went to one of these and they mentioned, oh yeah, there's a 237A1H waiver. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the greatest waiver ever. It's such an easy thing, in and out. And so, that one piece of information is going to make up for the money, frankly, for the conference. And second of all, it just changed, and more importantly, changed two people's lives. And frankly, I would have done malpractice if I just went ahead with the game plan I wanted to do, which is refile the I-130 and adjust status, which actually could work just as well. I kind of one of the cases I prefer doing that because gun removal isn't be too much a hassle. But that kind of makes more sense because the person could adjust or get naturalized faster. But I'm going into the weeds of it. The important thing is it's very important to get involved and go to these conferences. It's a lot of fun. It's a cost, but if you're an immigration attorney, at least go once every once in a while and do whatever you can to kind of mingle with your colleagues and our peers. It's a good bunch of people, as you know. We all love talking about immigration and being around this kind of stuff. So I hope to see you all there. Until next week, have a great one. Bye-bye.